Well, hello everyone. Here we are. We're in week 4. The midterm has already, been submitted. Those, at least for those that did submit it, it's in at turnitin.com. And during this week, I will begin the process of responding to each one of you with feedback and your points for the midterm. Last week, I discussed that after the midterm was completed, that there would be 56 points that could have been earned in this course, and that 44 points remained. Keep that in mind as you go through this week. There's another quiz worth 10 points this week. That's due on July the 17th, and the last day to drop the course with a W is going to be July 18th. Now, if you've been completing all assignments and getting points, you're probably in pretty good shape. There's no reason to be in a panic mode, because the third quiz is actually all questions. It's not an essay, and all those questions are contained in the reading. But if you missed work that you can't make up because late work's not accepted, and your points are extremely low, then you need to protect yourself. We talked about that last week, and withdrawing with a W is one way to do that. If you haven't submitted anything, or if you've submitted only a discussion board or something, and there's no way you can avoid an F, then I may drop you. But don't depend on that, because that's not my actual job to drop you. You need to take ownership of this course, especially in an online environment where you have to be the motivating factor. Okay? All right, again, I don't want to belabor that. I'd rather make this more on a positive note. Okay? But pay attention to where you're at. The reading assignment and the topic for this week. Okay, does God exist? And here you really got to bear down. You really got to read the pages in this section, and I would suggest reading it twice. Almost the same thing with the video. You really got to understand this. This topic is one of the, quote, big questions, something that you don't get introduced to in high school because of the separation of church and state, the paternal way that the high schools are run. But this is a philosophy course, and in the history of philosophy, this big question has had many authors who have weighed in on this question. Now, this is a class in America at this particular point in human history. We're part of Western civilization, and in the history of Western civilization, the dominant paradigm has been the Christian Judeo tradition, and so we've limited the discussion to does this God exist? In other words, does this God of the Bible exist? Does that mean that there's not other viable religions and other conceptions of God? Of course not. There are. But just in terms of managing this topic for an intro course, we're going to focus on what is the main historical tradition. Now, within that main historical condition, there has been certain classical arguments, and I've identified 5 of them in this section, and they have their own specific names, which you need to get a handle on. Interestingly enough, 4 of the 5 are actually constructed by the philosophers that wrote them or authored them as kind of positive proofs, kind of arguments that suggest that it is either rational or is either logically certain in some way that this particular conception of God actually exists. Of course, for each one of those arguments, there's been other philosophers in the history of philosophy that have weighed in and suggesting that the argument is certainly not a slam dunk, and have offered criticisms to these various arguments. You may notice that you will notice if you read the text, that the first 2 arguments, the ontological and cosmological, are authored by what are in fact saints of the Catholic Church, St. Anselm and St. Thomas Aquinas. And in the history of philosophy, these 2 scholastics, which were folks that were identified by the church in their day as outstanding intellectuals that the church wanted to have or have them do writings independent of just quoting scripture. So what in essence happened is both Anselm and Aquinas kind of took off their clerical hat, set it down, and put on their philosophy hat. And by that I mean a philosophy hat would be you're looking at this strictly from the standpoint of human reasoning. You're not, making pronouncements based on authority. Well, it says this in Genesis or this in Psalms. No, they don't do that. They make what they can believe are rational arguments. And in Anselm's case, he was trying to fulfill what he thought was important, which is faith through understanding. So he believed that human reason was a special gift that came from God, and therefore we could use reason. And in both cases, both Anselm and Aquinas looked back to what the Greek philosophers had started and used that as the way that they structured their arguments, which makes what they did philosophy and not just theology. Okay, and you should be able to see that as you read the text. Now, the discussion board exercise for this week requires that you identify one of those classical arguments and outline it in terms of whether you think it's sound or unsound. By that I mean whether you think it's a good, cogent argument or you think it's a weak argument. And then you have to respond to other students. So we'll have a full discussion board for this week. For your own benefit, don't gloss over this. Don't just say, okay, so I'm going to read one of the classical arguments and then I'll just write about that in the discussion board and ignore the others. No, don't do that. For a very good reason, as a quiz 3, you're going to have familiarity with all the arguments. Quiz 3 does not have an essay component. It's all answers to questions. And you have, it's an open book, and all the answers are there. So you can really maximize your points with Quiz 3 if you do the work. I know that, it's summer. You're trying to get through this course, maybe even some of you working and, obviously have other interest and things that you're doing. But this is, I think, a big topic. This is one of those topics where you've been in the course now for 4 weeks, and you should have gained a little maturity in terms of philosophy, kind of know how to navigate a little bit. And here is a major question that has been, like I said, had philosophers of significant standing in the history of philosophy weigh in on. In other words, try to sort out. And so I'm hoping, it's my hope, my personal hope, that this will be something that you really want to get into and work your way through. With an open mind, of course, looking at it, not from a preconceived view. Just to kind of give you a little more flavor on that, I've had students who are very knowledgeable about Christianity, for instance, and are very strong believers, and they've taken a look at some of these classical arguments that's outside faith. It's not about having faith. This is a reason-based exercise, not a faith-based exercise. And they've actually, taken apart some of the positive, arguments. I mean, they didn't shatter their faith because they believe that faith is separate from reason, but they were honest enough and conscientious enough to take a objective look. Because sometimes if you've got you already believe something and you already think that it's foundational to you, then you're going to side automatically with anyone that says things that seem to support that preconceived view. In philosophy, there's a fancy name called, you need to bracket out preconceptions. Just got to have a clear mind. In the martial arts, if anyone has been taking martial arts, it's called Musion, and it's a trick. Well, not a trick, it's a strategy. If you go into a situation already with preconceptions, you look at your opponent and you're already fearful of them, or you already believe that they're better. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You got too much noise going on in your mind. It's not clean. It's not clear. If anyone saw the movie The Last Samurai, with Tom Cruise, that's a tricky or a strategy that he eventually picked up on, and it was very successful for him. So in other words, you have to kind of push away, push out what you've thought about before on this. Take a fresh look at what these philosophers have to say, and understand their argument, and to see if the argument, like I said, is sound or unsound. Okay. So I'm going to take a careful read on the discussion boards, respond back to all those that make an initial posting, and I hope to see good work. All right, this will be a shorter video. I want to conclude by let's looking ahead to week 5 and 6, because this course is rapidly moving to its conclusion. Next week, we have to stay, it's like a race, it's like it's almost like a relay, where you're the only person in the relay, and what does that last person to get the baton have to do? Well, they got to pick up the pace a little bit, and we will need to do that, because we're going to deal with moral philosophy for week 5. But the good news is I'm really giving you 2 weeks to do this, because for week 6, the only thing that really is going to be due is your final essay worth that, your final term paper, which is worth 30 points. And so in next week's video 5, I will be outlining that. At the end of week 5, you won't have another quiz. You'll have a discussion board. But you'll get some time to work on your final paper that you will want to craft, and I'll speak more about that. It's going to follow the same format. You've already had instruction on that, and you've already demonstrated your abilities to develop a position paper through the midterm essay and through quiz 2, and you've gotten feedback from me, and I've outlined what those elements are, and that won't change for the final paper. It's still about developing a thesis, a clear and unambiguous thesis, defending that thesis with good arguments correlated with the text and video, and then developing a counter argument, or developing a rebuttal to the counter argument. Those components, if they're there, meet the criteria for a position paper, and then from that point forward, if it's well done, then it moves into can clearly move into A territory, because you've got all the elements, and the elements were well done. And I have a rubric that you will see, or you have available to you, that kind of outlines what the grading criteria is all about. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and shut this one down. Again, for those that are turning in all their work and doing very well in this course, I applaud your efforts. I know it's tough. This is that time of the year when there's a lot of competing interests, but hang in there, continue to work. I think there's some benefit to this. This is many students that have done well in this course have sent me emails that that this was an eye-opener. They enjoyed it. It expanded them and it stretched them a little bit. That's what an education is really about. It's not about a GPA. It's about discipline, learning good discipline, learning good study habits, and opening up your eyes to other ways of thinking and different ways of looking at an issue. So I hope we can accomplish that. So take care and good luck with all your other activities.